So I'll never forget sitting with you one day, and we're having a great time talking as always. And it's neat because sometimes you just change a word or two, and we know exactly what we're talking about. But I said to you, I can't help but say this. It's such an energizing conversation, and every time I think you're about to say Jesus, you say Torah, and I told you that, and you said, well, same thing. So that'd be a good starting place. What is Torah? Is it the same as Jesus? We
Okay.
talk a lot about the two Torahs, written and oral. And if you think of it, building a fence around
Yeah.
the Torah.
Well, it's a very interesting that you talk about him in context of the two Torahs because, let me just back up and explain until we can get there. Um, because I would argue that if we're going to talk about two Torahs, we should really talk about three Torahs. But we'll get there.
Now we're having fun.
We'll get there. I'll alienate everybody, Christians and Jews.
That's the point.
In the Jewish mind, the traditional Jewish mind, there's two Torahs, a written Torah and an oral Torah. And you notice I'm using the air quotes because most people wouldn't know what I'm talking about. The written Torah is what you think of it as. It can have many meanings. It can mean the first 5 books of the Bible, which is kind of the most conventional meaning. It can refer to just the book of Deuteronomy. It can refer to the commandments contained in all 5 of those books. It can refer to a specific teaching that comes from any of those 5 books. And to a certain extent, it can refer to any teaching that comes from the entirety of the Tanakh, or what Christians call the Old Testament. So, and now we get to the question of the two Torahs. It can also refer to any particular teaching based off of the Tanakh, what's called an oral teaching, a tradition. And more specifically, it can refer to, when you talk about the term oral Torah, it can refer to the traditions that form part of the Talmud, the part that was considered to be given, even a lot of Orthodox Jews believe given at Sinai, but are really the ancient sages' teachings about Torah.
If you had to pick one word, and I know that's impossible, but would the translation be teaching, instruction?
Torah means that's exactly what it means.
And we usually say law, which works,
which is,
but
yeah, it is sort of. What happens is the literal meaning is instruction or teaching. It's been translated as law because when the 70 rabbis got together, and we say rabbis, when we talk about rabbis before the 2nd century of the Common Era, or the 2nd century A.D., we're imparting current, terminology from past the 200s. Before that, the term rabbi didn't mean a spiritual leader before that. Or at least didn't mean the kind of spiritual leader that we're talking about, a teacher. They were sages, they were elders, but they weren't rabbis. They didn't call them that. So we're imputing that term, but the 70 scholars who translated the Tanakh, what we call the Old Testament, as it consisted at the time, years before Jesus, years, translating it into Greek. This translation is called the Septuagint. When they were translating that, they were trying to translate, not literally, this term Torah, but because to a Jew, the commandments, there are commandments within the instruction. And those commandments have the force of a law upon us because they're from God. They are literally a teaching, but we take them in that sense. At least that's the closest way they could equate it to something that, a concept in the Greek, that word nomos. And so what happened was they decided that the best way to communicate that was law. I think that was a mistake. My opinion, I'm far be it from me without their great grasp of knowledge as language is involved to differ with them, but I really think that was a mistake. And it's caused no end of confusion. But Torah literally means instruction, but usually it gets translated as law, and that's a big problem. But yes, that oral Torah, which is part of the Talmud. And usually, when you say oral Torah, they're talking about Talmud, and specifically part of the Talmud, the older part, because the second part is a commentary on the first part, so which is a commentary on the Torah. Everything's a commentary on something else,
including this.
Yeah. So we think of the two Torahs. Now, I would suggest that if we're going to talk about two Torahs, a written and an oral Torah, I want to talk about a third Torah, the spiritual Torah, and that is Jesus.
Wow.
He is a physical embodiment of everything a Torah is. And that is because his spirit is not that of a man. He is, on a spiritual plane, God. He has a physical manifestation of God, but in a spiritual sense, he is bigger than that. And it is the embodiment of everything Torah is. In other words, he walked it out perfectly because it's his nature. We all have a nature, a specific, what are we? My basic nature is I am a rabbi, I'm a teacher.